This is completely enclosed, and it's full of leathery objects like eggs or something. Wait a minute, this movement seems to have life. Organic life.
Hey, yo, my friends, welcome to what may be the most important episode of In Madness so far. I'm calling it episode 34. My esteemed colleague Vertebrae33 tells me this is episode realistically 79 of In Madness Pod. I am Shawn the Butcher, accompanied by Vertebrae33. How the hell's it going?
What's going on, Shawn? How you doing? This is a lot. This is about to be a lot.
We were worried about this episode since the day we started this podcast, and finally a year and 9 months later, we have decided it is time to dip our toe into it.
Yeah, we worked out all the issues. I stopped saying things like that and stuff like that over and over again, and we let ourselves get comfy in this. You know, we nestled in to a group of tentacles, and now we're ready to go to talk about this film that is probably one of the biggest films in both our lives, I would assume. For me, it is.
Yes, you are correct. This is probably the movie I've seen the most next to Godzilla 1954.
Okay.
Welcome to the premiere podcast, In Madness Pod, on the socials at In Madness Pod. Email us inmadnesspod@gmail.com if you want to ask us any questions, especially about this movie. We are on YouTube. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, give us the 5-star reviews. Check out the In Madness Spotify playlist, which now houses every band that we had on our recent concert that we did a couple of weeks ago. Shout outs to Lost Becomes for being on episode 33.25. And there is just so much. I was blasting it this right after that episode ended. I was blasting it. There is so much great music on there. I feel like for your Comic-Con booth, Vertebrae, you got to add Prince Party Man from the Batman soundtrack, because that song will liven up the whole Comic-Con. Everyone will start dancing in unison there.
I'll add it, but if I don't sell one shirt while it's on, then it'll never get
That's
played.
the test. So that's the test. You play a song, and if it sells a shirt, that song stays on the playlist.
It goes through what I call the Enter Sandman test. And that's a big test.
Can you explain that test?
Yeah, that test at Comic-Con is basically for the first, this will be my 11th year, I think, doing Comic-Con. First few years, myself and Metal Sucks did the booth together, and if we played Enter Sandman, somebody would come over and buy something. It was like people would come over clearing their eyes. Oh, Metallica, I know this. We did have some situations where people were wearing Metallica shirts, and we were playing other songs from Metallica, and they asked who it was, which was awkward. That happened more than once. But Enter Sandman, without fail, somebody, until I'd say like the last couple years, and then it didn't really grab. But there was a good 4 or 5 years. If you play it, if it was a lull in sales, I just put that on and people would come running over and buy t-shirts.
And for that, I feel like we should add it to the In Madness Spotify playlist. Shout outs to Metallica, the greatest band in the world. And if you would like to buy an In Madness shirt, go to inmadness.com. We have a bunch of them in assorted sizes. Thank you if you have bought one and taken a picture and sent it to us and allowed us to repost. It's great to see people repping for your boys. Spread the In Madness tentacles. Tell everyone you know about this show. And most importantly, Vertebrae, what mug do you have for this episode?
Oh, so I have, and you know what's a bummer is I thought I had more mugs for this film, and I can't find. I thought I had another one. I can't find it. That's how many mugs I have. So I have to do a whole roll call on it. But I have my Nostromo mug right there. You can see it above the glare. So, and if you haven't guessed or haven't read the title, we're doing Alien, Shawn.
Finally, we've made it. I came on with a Jason shirt, and Vertebrae immediately was like, "Don't you have an Alien shirt?" And I had to go run out of the room.
Yeah, see,
shirt. Yeah, you can.
And I have the classic poster you can see on YouTube.
Oh, sick. That's
I got the
cool.
Class the Poster shirt, and I will be doing a wardrobe change for throughout these episodes. Uh Here's the thing. This is going to be multiple episodes. And for that guy way back when, and we've given him too much pub already, but he talked about too much shite in the beginning. This is going to be a lot in the beginning because Shawn and I owe it to ourselves, having done this podcast for a year and 9 months, to sit and talk and marinate in this world on this film. And if you listen to this podcast ever, you have to love this film. I don't know anyone who doesn't love this film. And most people I talk to are insanely crazy about this film. So um, we're going to need time to talk about it, and we're going to ask people to contribute if they want to send in emails. I mentioned to Shawn, listen, you could send a voicemail in if you'd like, and tell us the first time you saw this film, what it means to you as a fan, what it means to you in your life. What order did you see the other films as along with this one? Because everybody has their own viewing experience with this. But this film and The Thing are probably the two reasons this podcast started. So once we do The Thing, I'm going to quit. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. And it'll be another year and 9 months probably before we get to
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah. And I think we certainly get other episodes out of this as we go along. But if you want to contribute, send in an email. Where can they send the email, Shawn?
inmadnesspod@gmail.com.
And send in a voicemail. Everybody's phone's got a voice memo thing on it. If you send it telling us a story about Alien and your love for the original, 1979 Alien, love to hear it. Theories about the film. The disclaimer at the beginning is there are so many gnarly bits for this film. There's books and books on it. There's no way I can hit them all, and nor would it be fun if I sat here and just spouted off,
The
pop-up video
stash
facts.
you sent me, you're like, here's all the stuff I have to study. And I was like, good Lord.
Yeah, I give myself a lot of homework to do. I've been practicing for this film my entire life, basically. So
This is it. This has all led to this moment for Vertebrae.
I can't even sit comfortable in the chair. I feel my neck getting tense. I'm gonna have to just stand up and run in place really fast out of nowhere, right?
So you did bring this up. I did see this movie millions of times recently. You, me, and Basil went to see it for the 45th anniversary, and before that, me and Basil saw it on like 35 millimeter film. Shout outs to the Cinema Arts House. I think it's in like Huntington or whatever, where they show all these classic movies. But you were saying, and I want to bring it up right now, I saw these movies backwards. Because I brought it up in our very first episode, just when we were testing out if episodes would work when we posted them. And I said one of the first things that got me into like horror movies was the Alien toys that came out. And they came out around the time Alien 3 came out. But all the toys, I think, were based off Aliens, the second movie. And every time I would walk into the video store, I'd see the alien with its face up against Sigourney Weaver's face. And I'm like, this looks like the coolest thing ever. So the first one of these I saw was Alien 3. I had no idea what was going on. I'm like, why is this android all chewed up? Why is this lady here? Who are these people? So then I went backwards and saw Aliens, and I'm like, oh my God, action-packed alien movie. This is perfect. And then I went and saw the first Alien movie, and I'm not gonna lie, way younger and stupider me thought that it was the weakest one out of the three going backwards, because out of all three of those movies, this has, I guess, the least action. However, it has the most, what I didn't notice at that time, like dreadful tension. It's so like thick that you can cut it with a knife from literally the opening scene.
Right. And so also to this, we'll get into it a little bit of just when this movie comes out and sort of the other big films around it and its impact. But I don't think I've ever told you this. So I've been saving this for years to tell you the first time I saw Alien. So I'm thinking about it today, and I'm like, how do I tell this story by not letting on how like old I am? Because I'm like really old, not that old, but older than you. And I was like, you know what? A year and 9 months on this podcast, it is what it is. If you want to stop listening because you think I'm an old fart, go ahead. I don't care. But so anyway, this movie comes out in 79. Little Vertebrae is obviously not going to the movies to see it at the time. So I was trying to figure out when I saw it, and I saw it a few years later. So somebody had it. This kid had it on VHS. And it wasn't even a kid that I hang out with all the time, but we ended up in his house, and his dad worked for the company who either makes them or distributes Slim Jims. Okay. So we go to his family room. There's like split level houses in the neighborhood I grew up in. So it's like a big family room a few steps down from the kitchen. And we go in there, and there's just large brown paper bag full of Slim Jims. Right. And then all the little kids who rode their bikes over are like, we're going to watch Alien. So, young Vertebrae, free food, Slim Jims, Alien. I've wanted to see this movie. I'm terrified. So this movie, Shawn, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to some extent, Amityville Horror, but not as much. But the story, at least, Friday the 13th, in a lot of ways, Halloween. These are films where the story became bigger than the movie sometimes, and kids would talk about it like, "Oh, have you?" It was like a badge of honor that you had seen this film, right? Maybe it's a badge of bad parenting that you had seen it at such a young age. I don't know, but anyway, so we begin to just hammer down Slim Jims. I'm talking just peel and eat Slim Jim after Slim Jim, and we start watching Alien. Well, young me, pacing of the movie is not what, right? So you're doing other things while it's going on. And then that scene comes on. And, and we're going to be we're spoiling this movie because we're going to be jumping all over the place. So if you have not ever seen Alien from 1979, stop this, go back and watch it, and then come back to us. Chestburster scene happens. And I'm just eating Slim Jims. Now suddenly I'm like, all of us in the room stop eating Slim Jims, and we're all just like nauseated. The whole room smells like that spiced meat and sweaty little kids who rode their bikes there. And I just remember I had to go home for dinner, and I'm riding my bike home, and I was so sick to my stomach, and I could not get that visual out of my head. I felt like something was going to erupt from me, and it probably did later on, but at another end. But I felt like something was going, just like the chest burster, because I'm just nauseated and I'm burping up that Slim Jim taste. And I remember I went home and like my mom thought I was like sick or something. Like
the food ain't that bad, baby.
Yeah, like I wasn't eating dinner, and that's not like me. And I remember it's ingrained in my brain. I laid in bed that night and I just couldn't, your stomach's doing flip-flops anyway from, I don't know, Shawn, I probably had at least 20 Slim Jims, at least 20.
It's gotta be a world record.
And like the big ones. Oh, there were kids eating more because it was free. Like nobody's policing us, right? And it's just a crumpled big brown paper shopping bag full of these things. And it just stuck in my brain. And then went to school. People were talking about it on the playground and everyone had to see it. There's a comic adaptation, which I have, and I have a special version of it now, which we can show online. And you're talking about that and you're into it, and everybody's supposedly, nowhere near the age to watch it. But like, we couldn't stop talking about Alien. We just could not stop. And, a lot of these movies we do, I can't remember the exact moment, but I remember the exact street rounding the corner to my parents' house, feeling like my chest was going to explode. And like, maybe like, my imagination goes crazy, but like the Slim Jims formed like this monster that's going to now like erupt out of my chest. And, besides Star Wars, Ridley Scott really built universes in this and Blade Runner that were my, world. And I will say, like, the thing I got into a little bit later, I didn't hit it it came out in 82, and I didn't hit it then in 82. It kind of went over my head. But this was one that everybody had to see. It was, it was also too is like Star Wars comes out in 77, and that's kind of how this film gets greenlit, right? This is how they get the funding. This script is kicking around, and we'll go into it in a minute about that. But so it's like we'd all seen Star Wars, and now like we're going to see this thing, and like you think you're getting Star Wars, and like you're really not getting Star Wars. And if you follow me for my art and stuff, I kind of, it's like Star Wars in a way. It leans darker, right? My stuff, the creatures and the monsters and everything, and a little bit of biomechanical and stuff. So but yeah, so I'm not a snob. I did come into it pure. I didn't see Aliens. I saw Aliens when it came out. And at that time I did not like it as much as Alien, and I still don't, but we can get into that when we get to Aliens, because we'll have to do it, because my name's in the credits of the documentary. But
It is now.
yeah, but so that's crazy. Was this, before we get into it, so when did you, so you see the third one, you go back, you see Aliens, you see Alien. When does Alien, the original one, click for you?
I don't know. It was a weird transition, because once I saw all three, I knew that I liked them all, but I wasn't obsessed. So I bought the three. They had, like, every time I go to Best Buy, I'd see like the 3 collection of Alien 1, 2, and 3, and I'm like, I gotta get those. I really don't remember when the first Alien movie clicked, that I was like, oh, this movie is so much like better and darker and more like nerve driven and action packed. I don't know when it clicked for me, and it might have not been till maybe like recently, like the last 10 years or something. Just going to see it more with Basil, and like watching the director's cut and watching the regular cut, and seeing like, I mean, like, because I'll forget, and I'll be like, the Brett with the chains, and I'm like, wasn't there an alien there one time? I know damn well. And then I go back and watch the other one, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's an alien in this one. I don't remember exactly when it clicked, but I mean, as of this day, it's 100% my favorite Alien movie.
And I watched the original 79 version for this, not the extended director's cut, which Ridley Scott kind of panned as a, they were just trying to make extra money from it. So I hope which one did you watch?
It's honestly, I watched them both, and there's only like 3 extra scenes in the director's cut, which I will bring up as they're happening.
Yeah. So Alien comes out 1979, science fiction horror film directed by Ridley Scott, written by Dan O'Bannon. It's based on a story by O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett. Walter Hill comes into this for a little bit and kind of works on the script, and you can certainly see when he comes in, kind of, that's where we get that choppy dialogue, that like very kind of workman dialogue. They're often refer to this movie as like Truckers in Space, right? And this natural, and when we get into the scenes, we can talk about it, but the banter that they have and their natural dialogue and the way they cut to it, and it feels very real in a lot of ways. So it's interesting. So there's a novelization of this, which I listened to the audiobook, and I had asked you, because so we're really jumping all over, but I had asked you if you were able to find out how many times.
Got it here. To the best of my estimation. I don't know if it's pinpoint, but we could actually look it up when we get to it. I want to look
so
it up.
we'll get to that for sure. So we get Ridley Scott, who we've talked about before. He's known for doing TV commercials, and he's, you can almost tell the way he goes through the film. He can do things in minute and 2-minute bursts in the film, and that's what he's known for. So they bring him in kind of late in the production, but I want to back up to kind of how this film is birthed in the first place, and then we can kind of get into the cast and all the other stuff. So there's an amazing making of book by J.W. Rinzler, the late great J.W. Rinzler, who wrote a lot of the making of Star Wars books, called The Making of Alien, which came out in 2019. And it's an incredible book. And also, if you go to J.W. Rinzler's YouTube, I think there's a point on one of his last YouTubes that he did where somebody named Vertebrae33 asks him a question, and he calls me Vertebrae33 on the thing. So anyway, Rinzler was awesome, and this is that's an incredible book. I can't even begin to touch all of the information in that book. So Dan O'Bannon writes this script called They Bite about these cicada creatures, and he also drew Dan O'Bannon, and he does a bunch of sketches of these monsters and stuff. And then he works with our buddy John Carpenter on a film called Dark Star. Have you ever seen Dark Star?
No.
Okay, so Dark Star is supposed to be almost like a spoof type science fiction film, and the alien that's in it is known for being called the beach ball alien. It's literally like just like this big ball that they're fighting. It's a pretty absurd film. I think you can find it on Tubi. I think might have it. Cheap plug for Tubi, but so they do when they're doing that, they bring on Ron Cobb into the film, who goes on to do a lot of concept art for this film, and he's done creatures for the Cantina and stuff. So that happens, and then we get the next thing on the timeline is Jodorowsky's Dune. So Alejandro Jodorowsky, the surrealist filmmaker, decides he's going to do an adaptation of Dune, and he brings in Dan O'Bannon, and they bring in the artist Mobius, H.R. Giger. They bring in Salvador Dali, who was supposed to play the Emperor. And a fun story with that is he asked for $100,000 per hour to act in the movie. So Jodorowsky accepts this. Then he reduces his scenes. So he's basically like he could get him for 1 hour. And then they were going to have like his lines be spoken by like a robotic lookalike.
Eesh.
So this movie, Jodorowsky's Dune, there's a documentary on the making of this movie. This movie would have been insane, absolutely insane. But the coolest thing is they get all these artists together. They get Giger and Mobius goes on to work on Alien a little bit, and they bring them together and they do all this concept art, and then this falls apart. So this falling apart sort of gives birth to the Alien deal. And it's pretty incredible. There's for this Dune movie that was never made, there's this massive book of all this artwork, and they've never released it. But there's been talk of doing like a hardcover version that everybody could buy. But in the movie, they flipped through it. That's definitely a worthwhile watch. Just I can't even touch on. We would talk for an hour about how insane that film was going to be. But I just wanted to give you one fact about the Salvador Dali 100,000. So that's a quick snippet. There's more to the timeline, but that's a quick snippet of that timeline for the movie. The soundtrack, Shawn, Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack. I do have it on vinyl. Does that beat you to the punch for asking? Amazing composer, Chinatown, Patton, Planet of the Apes, Poltergeist, Basic Instinct, Rambo, Gremlins. So we mentioned it before in our Gremlins episode. And then we get this novelization that I listened to, done by Alan Dean Foster, who's done novelizations for, I think, all of the Alien films. So there's an Alien 3 novelization out there, Shawn, that you got to listen to.
I want it.
But the interesting thing about these novelizations is, and I bring them up a lot because that period of time is a big deal for them. They do them now. You bought the Halloween one, right? That they reissued. But if you take it back to that time, you'd see a movie, and then when are you going to see it again? If it's pre-video stores and all that, when do you see it again? So everything you do is in your own imagination. Maybe you pick up a Starlog or something to read about it. So the novelizations were ways for people to kind of tap into it. The problem with them is that they're just given a script and they have to write a book. So they fill it in with lots of things that often don't make any sense. So he writes this. Alan Dean Foster writes this in 3 weeks, which is insane. And he said that was actually long. And he has a really cool book about, I think that it's called like The Director Should Have Shot Me, about all the novelizations he did. He also wrote the Thing novelization, Krull, he did some Transformers, he did all the Alien movies, Terminator Salvation, he did some Star Wars films, famously Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which is the sequel to Star Wars, which was before Empire came out. So he was kind of heavy hitter in that area. And our buddy Ridley Scott, we don't even have to mention all the things that Ridley Scott has worked on, but it's a ton. And that's a little backstory on that. Do you want to get to the cast and then we could move forward?
Yeah.
So apparently, Shawn, this cast was a big deal to people at the time, and Sigourney being kind of the relative unknown, but a lot of people knew the other actors from other things. So we get that sort of almost bait and switch because we get Tom Skerritt as Dallas, and it looks like he's going to be the star of the film, the hero of the film. We get John Hurt as Kane, who at one point in the film looks like he's going to be the leader of this film. We get Veronica Cartwright as Lambert, who's the navigator, who's us in the film. She's the people.
Poor Lambert.
Yeah, she's us though, Shawn. Right? Like, meaning like we're seeing it through her. Like she, oh my god, like I just want to get out of here. Like,
I
get me out
don't
of this.
want to be here.
Yes. Yaphet Kotto as Parker. And he was in a bunch of films. He was famous in Live and Let Die. The great Harry Dean Stanton as Brett.
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the one I want to ask. So in the novelization, I couldn't count because it was so many, but he must have keyed into that in the script. So he carried it through the entire film. So I'm not gonna exaggerate. I'm gonna say he said the word right probably 200 times in the novelization.
It's a lot less on my tallies. Yeah.
Yeah. Ian Holm as Ash, and any kids listening, they're looking at Ian Holm and they're thinking like Bilbo Baggins, right? Because that's who he played. But no, this is an epic
Man,
performance by
I'll
Ian
say it
Holm.
right now. Ash nominated for In Madness Villain Hall of Fame.
Yes, I think he's in the top 3.
Yeah, him, Miss
Yeah.
Carmody.
Yeah.
We'll figure out the third one.
So we do get and we get Jones the cat. So Jones the cat was portrayed by 4 different cats.
Oh, really?
And they say it was one for holding, one for hissing, one for scampering. So they had like certain cats that would do certain things. But Shawn, that brings us to what we always talk about. How many crew members are there?
I mean, I get into it. You want to get so we have a crew of 7.
7 crew members. So here we are arriving at that number. I would say we're probably going to hit all the sins pretty easy. And then we do get some other religious overtones later on in the film, so we can get into it then. But what's interesting is this film, they're working on the script. Walter Hill comes in, then Walter Hill is going to direct it, and then Walter Hill backs out of directing it, although he's still credited. He works on the script, and they have to get They have to get Ridley Scott to come in, and he comes in like late in the process. Like I like to say he probably comes in around like 78, and this movie comes out in 79. So it's a shotgun. The cast, people are already cast for their roles and everything by the time they bring Ridley into this situation. So I do have a whole list of things that this film borrowed from. And I think that would be a good way to start the next episode about this. We could kind of run through it because I've already talked enough. All right, and then we can get to it. But we can talk a little bit later on about Giger, and I have a nice little Giger story to tell you in one of the other episodes. But I think we should start. What do you think?
Ready? Let's go. Episode 34 in Madness. Alien. We're in space. We see a planet shining coming off back of it, and the words alien slowly form on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
We see our ship, the Nostromo, a commercial towing vehicle, processing 20 million tons of mineral ore. I don't know what that is. It's returning to Earth with a crew of 7.
So hold on, I'll stop you there. So this title sequence that we have, this amazing title sequence where these lines pop up. First of all, every single time, I think I might have said this on another episode, but every single time I watch this, I get really nervous that there's no way the middle line on the E is going to fit. I don't know why. As a designer, I'm like, there's no way. But to show you how epic this movie is, you can just put those lines on something without them completely filled in, one line for each letter, and people will know you're talking about Alien. incredible title sequence. This title sequence designed by Richard Greenberg. And then in 2013, he did an interview for my new favorite website called artofthetitle.com. So for nerds like me, there's a website where you can go and hear. We talked about it with Seven, the title sequence that they did. And he said he wanted to do something unsettling. Well, it was unsettling to me because I wasn't sure if the E could form properly. But it's just interesting that it's in my brain. I always thought for many years, I pictured this in the center of the screen in my head, like if you had asked me to draw it. But the whole time it's forming, we're getting the cast and the production people underneath it. I think if they do this now, it's just that title in the middle. There's no way they don't really do that as much anymore. But he worked on Superman title sequence. He won an award for that. And the typeface used was Helvetica Black. So if people want to emulate that, they can go in and grab that typeface. But what a cool opening already. Kind of a lot to think about.
Inside the ship, it's quiet. There's tubes everywhere. It's this awesome setup. You could tell the ship is like asleep. We get a shot of the birds that dunk their heads in the water, which is a common theme throughout these Alien movies. Spoiler alert, it's also in Alien Romulus.
Don't do that to me. Why would you do that to me?
It's literally what were you going to see it and like blow your mind? Yeah, that's the only spoiler I'll give.
So I'm going to stop you again. So we get the Nostromo. So Ridley Scott's first film he does is called The Duelists, and that's a film adapted from a Joseph Conrad book. And Nostromo was named after a Joseph Conrad story. So that clearly Ridley comes in and names it. Joseph Conrad is famously, considered just a huge author, one of the greatest writers in English language. For movie fans, most famously known for having a book called Heart of Darkness, which was adapted into Apocalypse Now. So we get our nod to Joseph Conrad here. And we get this panning through the ship, Shawn, where we're almost looking around, and it's still, but there's movement, but it almost is like a serial killer. It could be like a Michael Myers is glancing around, or, we get everything we need in all the shots, but it's a lot of movement for a still ship. It feels, this ship has very much it's a submarine. It feels like it could be. And then I have a whole thing about these drinking birds, but maybe we'll wait because I want to talk to you about some science.
Okay.
So we'll do that on the next episode. We'll start off with that and something.
And your
else.
lists and Giger. Yeah, make sure you save all of these for the next episode. The ship wakes up. Computers are going off. Instruments are turning on. You hear this awesome, creepy, scary alert noise. Whatever it is.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to sample that. That was great.
The ship begins to come to life. The lights are going on. Doors are opening. Pods are opening. And slowly our crew wakes up from hypersleep.
Mm-hmm.
Settle down for a bite to eat. Brett and Parker, two of my favorites in this movie. I'd like to think that's us in this movie instead of poor Lambert.
100%. I meant Lambert was the fans sort of a fan view perspective, but Kane is the first one to wake up. If we go back a little bit, we hear this slight noise. There's papers rustling, which is, in this still ship. Why would there be air moving around? Maybe it's the vents kicking on as they're doing that. We have the helmets almost like communicating with each other, kind of when they kick on. And this gives us this very like creepy haunted house vibes to this. And our first little jump scare is when they kick on, and then we get these pods, this almost like sort of rebirth scene from them emerging from these pods. They even wearing stuff that look a little like diapers. We're going to get a ton of sexual overtones and birth and things in this film. But this is just a cool, we had the dirty ship. We saw the hallways. It looks like very blue collar. and then it gets very 2001 suddenly when these pods open. And I'll assume Jones is with Ripley. I'm
Probably.
assuming. I'm thinking.
Oh, he's got a
She's
little
with.
Jones pod.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't think so. I maybe, but I mean, she's with Ripley eventually, and they seem very close. They're next to each other in this first scene. So, um, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm gonna keep
It's
stopping you.
okay.
Like
Go ahead.
really.
Brett and Parker are the repairmen on this ship. They're enjoying themselves at the table, playing around. First person to rise up, Kane, who is in some kind of leadership role in this crew. I don't know what. I don't have their rankings or whatever, but Kane seems definitely like a leader.
Yeah, and Kane seems very much like the go-getter of this crew, right? Like he's the first one up. He's the executive officer. So Dallas is the captain, Ripley is the warrant officer, Lambert is the navigator, with the chief engineer is Parker, Brett is the engineering technician, and then the science officer is Ash. So they all have their distinct sort of corporate on the ship roles. They clearly sort of get along. It feels like there's some heat with Lambert and Ripley at points, some pre-existing issues. Um, but it's interesting, right? So Kane is the guy who feels like he's in charge. He's the first one out of the pod, the first one in his robe. They kind of do these cutaways with him as he's sitting there, and the wipes are fade. They do fades in the different shots when he's sitting there, and then when they get there to the eating, Shawn, they have these mugs. Now, hear me out. They have they're Tupperware mugs that they're using with the Weil and Yutani logo on it. And it's subtle, not like in more recent films where they plaster it everywhere and put it in your face. It's subtle. And years ago, somebody did reproductions of them you could buy, and I missed out on it. So if anyone knows if they've got the Weil and Yutani, you can get similar Tupperware mugs on eBay, but I haven't been able to get one with the logo. I've thought about buying them and silk screening my own Weil and Yutani logo on it, but you know how mug crazy I am. I feel like I need to have one of these.
You got to get that Whale and Yutani licensing so you can throw it on.
Oh, that'd be amazing. I mean, they sold them. I don't know what it was, like Think Geek or somebody had them for a little while, and then they sold out and they never did it again. I feel like that's something you should just keep in stock. It was like a bowl and a mug set, like the Tupperware. It probably wasn't actual Tupperware, but these were just actual Tupperware that existed at that time. But this ship, this very lived in look, we're gonna start getting this banter between them. These scenes where they're filmed when they're talking is filmed with 2 cameras. And Ridley Scott operated one of the cameras, which directors don't always operate, the camera themselves. And he operated one of them, and they sort of, you can tell the shots are kind of off frame at times. We're weaving in and out of this conversation as they're talking. It feels very much like a documentary or very natural, or we're part of this ship. And I think that's one of the things that this film people don't realize is how much it brings us into this world quickly, and we get a quick glimpse of who they are and what they're doing, and we get kind of their structure and everything, and then that helps us when we get to the horror of it because we've gotten used to these folks.
They're sitting around a table eating their meal. Kane, the first one to rise, the first pretty much words of dialogue in this movie, he says, "I feel dead." Parker looks at him and says, "Anyone ever tell you look dead?" Ah, yes, foreshadowing. The first 4 lines of dialogue in the first 4 minutes of this movie. Brett and Parker begin asking about the bonus situation. They want full shares. They're pissed because everyone on the ship is getting more money than them. Dallas, the captain, gets summoned by Mother, who's the central beacon, the computer system on this ship. The message is for his eyes only. He enters the secret captain's room, got all these little flashing lights, looks very cool, futuristic. Everything in this movie looks super cool and futuristic.
Mm-hmm.
The main computer Mother begins telling Dallas what's up. Rest of the crew go to their stations and begin looking for Earth, but they can't find it. Uh-oh.
Yeah, so let's back up a sec. So we get Mother, which is MUTHUR 6000. So that's the name of the computer. And then they just, affectionately call it Mother. there are two things you can look for when you watch this movie again. One I call Ash Cam.
Mm.
Just watch this film one time where you only look at Ash in his scenes, where he's in it, even if he's in the background. This guy is the worst. And you can see it on his face from the beginning. And it's just interesting if you watch it just looking at him, those scenes, it kind of gives you another perspective of sort of once you know what's going to happen, you watch him, you're like, he knows right now. He knows right now. Um, the other thing is you'll notice there's symbols throughout the ship, and these symbols created by Ron Cobb are called he called them and this is a long name for this. He probably should have come up with a shorter name, but the semiotic standard for all commercial transstellar utility lifter and heavy element transport spacecraft.
Wow.
So essentially, you'll see those symbols. It almost looks like the Nabisco symbol. There's one with the red dots. They have them everywhere. There's a chart you can find online, which we will post eventually, and it will tell you kind of what all of those symbols are. So another time you watch this movie, you can not only do the ash cam, but you can sort of pay attention to where these symbols pop up. And you were talking about how cool and futuristic it looks. Well, they built so much of this, Shawn, and they built this set and it's cramped and tight. Matter of fact, Ridley, and we'll get into it later on, liked to mess with his actors at the time. So they actually were make certain areas smaller, more narrow the next day when they went to film, which would add to people's weirdness. We see the top of corridors, which tells us this is not just some B horror movie that's on a set. Like they built this thing and you're inside of it, which helps you feel cramped as well. And when we go in here to Mother, you'll hear these sounds. It's almost like a breathing sound. It's almost like Michael Myers behind the mask or a heart beating. This is the heart of the ship. And it's very interesting. I just love that he also enters that hallway and he has to kind of punch a code and then pull a card out and punch it in this other thing. Like he's got a, it's security to get in, but it's like he's punching into work at the same time too. And I got to go in there and do, and he's in this fantastic Nostromo jacket as well. But no detail was spared in the making. And just remember, if you're younger and you're watching this movie, this film came out in 1979, well ahead of its time.
Ripley begins trying to contact Antarctica Air Traffic Control. Do you think she's contacting MacReady and his crew?
That's awesome. You know what's funny is as many times as I saw this film, the few times I watched it for this, I started to think that. I certainly think this film, The Thing, owes a lot to this film. And we get into use of certain technology and the discovery of things, which all owes it to Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. And there's a lot of people who will say that this is one of the most Lovecraftian science fiction horror movies ever made. So I don't think that's an accident. Like I think that's Ridley's nod to, or O'Bannon's nod to, because O'Bannon was a huge Lovecraft fan, to At the Mountains of Madness, and he draws a lot from that for this film. So, but yes, let's put them together. Let's have him reaching out to MacReady, and maybe he just lost at computer chess, so he's not paying attention to them, and he could care less.
Windows. Windows is he's on the mic. Yeah. The headphones. Brett and Parker in their little basement quarters. They're still angry about the bonus situation. Hilariously, Parker's telling Brett, nobody ever comes down here because of you. You don't have any personality. I feel like this is me and Vertebrae yelling at each other in the basement quarters. Everyone meets in the spot where they're eating dinner. And I love this. Ash is sitting in Parker's seat. Parker approaches him from behind and says, excuse me, you're in my seat. He's smiling at Ash. Ash apologizes, gets up and moves. The second Ash stands up and turns his back to Parker, Parker shoots him the nastiest look I've seen in any movie. Do you think he knows about Ash? He seems pretty surprised when the big reveal happens. Maybe he doesn't know the full details, but I know he doesn't like Ash.
Yeah, I think he just doesn't like Ash. Ash is also, we find out Ash is new to this crew. So if they've all known each other in the past and then this guy shows up, it's like, hey, I've been on this ship for a while. Like this is very much, we said truckers in space. So they're in cramped quarters, but they're hauling this massive thing behind them. And I think that they get to know each other and the roles that they're in. And it really annoys him. I love that scene. It's, or that part in that scene. It's very quirky. In the beginning, they're playing off us just thinking Ash is, the stereotypical nerdy science guy in a science fiction film, right? Nobody saw what happens with Ash. Nobody. If somebody tells you they knew that in advance, there's no way. And they do a very good job of just kind of making him out to be a jerk without even leading into what he is all about. And I think part of the problem with all the other films in the series are, once you reveal these things in this very majestic manner, people feel they have to top it, and it's pretty hard to top the first time you see a lot of this stuff in this film. And I think we've been chasing it ever since. And I think there's parts of other films that are fantastic. And someday maybe, Shawn, we'll do like a ranking of our favorite alien films. I'll go against everything I ever said on this podcast and we'll rank them.
There's so much spite that when Ash gets up, Parker even wipes the seat off. You can hear that there's nothing on it. I don't know what he's wiping, but he brushes it off before he sits down. It's super weird and super spiteful. Dallas says they're only halfway to Earth. Mother changed the course of their journey. Everyone seems upset. Dallas tells them this could happen should certain situations arise. And they have. She's picked up a transmission of unknown origin and got us up to check it out. A transmission? Out here, Ripley is not stoked. Even less stoked is poor Lambert. She already knows, I think at this point, she's dead. It's over. It's done for Lambert. Like she knows how this entire movie plays out. Full of dread, Lambert says, "What kind of transmission?" Dallas says in his acoustical beacon repeats intervals of 12 seconds. Kane asks if it's an SOS. Dallas don't know. Ripley says human. Dallas don't know. Uh-oh. Parker says, this ain't my job. He wants more money for this job. Ash angrily stops him. If you do not complete this mission, you forfeit all of your money. So the guys laugh. He looks at Brett, says, we're going in. And in they go.
Mm-hmm. And Ash knows very quickly sort of the rules on what they do if they don't go in. And he's... So there's a couple of theories on this, Shawn. We could talk about it later, maybe. Just when does Ash know and when does he know?
I think the second Dallas is in there talking to Mother.
So I seem to think that he knew before the mission, and that's why they put him on the mission. That's why they put a new science officer on the mission, because they're going to stray. Maybe they got a hint of this signal and they sort of know what it could be. And then he's going to stray. You know, what's funny is Lambert, Veronica Cartwright, she originally read for the role of Ripley, and then she didn't know she didn't get it until she arrived to her wardrobe. And then they were like, hey, it's not going to be you. And she didn't like Lambert's character because she said she thought she was too weak. And they convinced her that she was the audience fears. And she was supposed to reflect what the audience is feeling. So if you get in those situations and you're like, you have one person that's totally neurotic about it and really upset, that's gonna, when you're watching it, you're gonna kind of sympathize with her and be like, oh my god, why is she so upset about this? You know, not even a lot has gone on yet, but now you already feel uncomfortable because she's freaking out. Like at this point, I mean, they're just going to check out a signal, you know what I mean? And obviously we know what this film is about, but as a character in the film, like, hey, what's the big deal, you know? So, and they're gonna go land on the moon LV 426, which hence that's why we get Alien Day is April 26th because of LV 426.
They land on this moon. However, when they land, I love it. One of these little feats on this little ship they got, it just lands on this little itty bitty like baby rock, which then causes massive damage to this entire ship. Sirens going off, things blowing up, sparks coming out, all because of this little tiny rock they landed on.
And you know, it's funny. They built that landing, like the leg and stuff, and the sets are very extensive on this. But I do love that now we get science fiction movies, and we can debate certainly whether this is science fiction, this is horror, both, whatever you want to call it. But where we've seen so much of ships landing and taking off and all of this, it's, you know, it becomes mundane to some people. I love that this movie makes all of that a big deal. Like, none of it is easy. Like, it's difficult to land this massive ship here, and it's difficult to take off, and one little thing can throw it off, and we can, you know, have it sort of like a million switches that we've got to push and pull to get this thing right. I think it's cool. I think the shots of the ship in it are cool. They give it there. It's very majestic. It gives more of this blue collar feel to what they're doing on the ship. But yeah, it's not a very big rock that throws them off.
Parker and Brett are telling the crew all the info about how bad the ship is damaged. Crew asks how long it's going to take to fix. Brett tells Parker, say 17 hours. Parker says at least 25 hours. I love it. Give yourself some break time, a little rest time. And then if you get the job done earlier, you look like the hero. Ripley tells the boys she's coming down. They are not stoked. What the hell's she coming down here for? Lambert's smoking a stogie, looking none too happy. Ash, Kane, and Dallas are checking atmospheric conditions, how far they are from the transmission. Kane immediately wants to know, is it walking distance? Dallas laughs nervously. Ash tells him there's a bunch of crap in the air that'll kill him. Lambert is hearing all of this in the background, looking miserable. Kane volunteers to be the first in the crew to head out. Dallas tells Lambert she's going to which she angrily replies, swell.
Yeah. And what does he describe this atmosphere as? Primordial, which is really interesting considering what we're about to get. And I would say what we got in like Prometheus and what we're going to learn about more. You know, I mentioned Prometheus, but obviously when I'm doing the notes for this, I'm desperately trying to stay focused on just this film and not what came before it and what came after it. But, you know, that's just an interesting way of putting it. We're sort of getting the beginning of something.
Now we get one of the weirdest moments in this movie. It's this weird shot of Ash. He's putting on this little bodysuit.
Mm-hmm.
And he does this quick little running motion. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's excitement, nervousness, but it's weird. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, that is bizarre. I never understood exactly what it was. It's very like
It's like
he's trying to be. It's childish. Like he does a jazz hands thing later on when he's looking at everybody through the thing. You'll see it. It's like I think this is where we're supposed to get a teeny glimpse of kind of what he's about. Like, it's creepy because he's almost like sort of pretending to be human, or maybe he's like super pumped that they're about to do this. Yeah, it's very complex. You know, it looks like in the beginning of the film when they're eating, he's eating too. Some people say he doesn't eat.
He does. I was watching. He does. He also drinks his milk, his special milk, but he does. I did notice that he was consuming food. However, I think they can, because even Bishop was like,
but again,
so
like we only have Ash so far, right?
Yeah, that's
so
true.
Bishop's going to be the add-on to this.
He definitely does eat food.
Yeah, he has that bowl. It looks like cereal, and it looks like he has milk too, which he clearly runs on milk. I think. I don't know. It's like it's his blood.
Fuel.
Yeah, but yeah, this is. I never understood what it was. I don't know, and I should have looked it up if it's an ad lib, because the script is, if you read the script, the final shooting script, they really go off script a lot. Ridley is really letting them be who they are as people, you know, and certainly he's messing with them. They did a lot of filming in the middle of the night, overnight, for no reason, because these are sets. So there was no reason to film in the middle of the night other than just throwing everybody off and having them feel uncomfortable. You know, when you're doing these scenes at 3-4 o'clock in the morning, you feel like crap. You're cramped. your coworkers are probably really getting on your nerves, and then you have to film it. But this, I wish somebody could explain it to us. I mean, it doesn't need an explanation. I'm glad they never did, but it adds to his overall weirdness.
Kane, Dallas, and Lambert head out. Ash is at the helm, guiding them from inside the ship, watching them on a TV monitor. In the bottom of the ship, there's tons of noise and steam coming from everywhere. Brett and Parker are breaking Ripley's balls about getting more shares. She tells them they'll get what's coming to them. And they're like, what? And she tells him to fuck off. She walks away, and I love it. Parker pulls on a lever, and it stops all the steam and all the madness and all the noise, and it's total silence. And Brett's behind him just laughing, smoking a cigarette. And then what does he do? Parker's like, son of a bitch. And he puts the steam back on, and Brett's just looking at him like, what are you mad about? Like, it's just such a weird moment.
And this dirty, room that they're in, this machine room and everything, this sort of lived in look, this dirty spaceship stuff really runs counterpoint to a lot of science fiction films that were coming out. We get it in Star Wars. We do get the used future, and this kind of takes it to another level, that it's like they're just kind of holding this thing together as they have to work. This is the working man's ship, and this was a big change. Old science fiction movies, Shawn, in the 50s and 60s, it was like, oh, I have my ray gun and I'm wearing tinfoil and everything's shiny and the future's so bright. And here it's like, no, these are like, we can relate to these characters. This is a guy working a job,
Regular ass people.
Yeah, he doesn't want to listen to her. He doesn't want him to come down. They're going to mess with each other the whole time. And it happens all the time now, but in 1979, this was the film that laid out that framework for plenty of other people, because you get 2001, it's very clean, very clean. You get Star Wars, it's dirty and it's lived in, but there's still some sleekness to the ships, the TIE fighters, the X-Wings. They're very smooth looking. They might be dirty. This ship is clunky, these weird sort of like almost dome type things, and inside they each have their own little work areas that are just cramped and full of buttons and switches and screens. It's pretty cool. Yeah, this steam room part, this is, dare I say, it's probably the last time we laugh in this movie, I think.
Maybe. No. What are you, a parrot, man? Shape up. No, that's another one. Ripley checks on Ash. Asks him if he knows what the transmission they're getting is yet. Mother hasn't figured it out yet. Still collating. I love you. I use that term all the time now because of Ash. You get your job done yet? No, I'm still collating. Ripley asks if she wants to get. Ripley asks to give it a shot, figure out what this transmission is. Ash stalls and he says, "Please do," but you can tell he means please don't. We see the star of the show, my man Jonesy, the orange cat, just chilling, licking himself on the floor. Adorable little guy. Kane, Lambert, and Dallas find a ship. Looks like a horseshoe almost. Almost looks like an alien. Lambert immediately is like, nah, let's go back. Friggin' curious Kane. We've come this far. We must go on. We have to go on. They head in. The inside of this ship is awesome. It looks like an alien. All these tubes, curves, all black. It looks like the skin of what ends up being a xenomorph.
So wait, you undersold this. You just said they just saw a ship. No, they saw the ship, the derelict. Ship. This is designed by Giger. This is very much, and we're going to get into H.R. Giger's sort of his sexual overtones throughout his artwork and in this film, but it almost looks like two legs in the air, or it's like a horseshoe, and then we have like kind of these two orifices. They enter one of them. It is all very sexual. It is all very, Giger is known for his biomech art, surrealist painter, and well known before this film. So people knew him, and he had released books before this film. And this is the first time any ship like this has ever been seen on film. This is, and I assume he did a lot of the paintings and stuff too. So I figure that's a painting that he did for the background. So Giger Passed away 2014. Hans Rudy, so H.R. Giger. It drives me nuts when people say Geiger because it's incorrect. And then you correct them and you look like the nerdy art guy. But his work, there's a documentary on him, and it is an incredible documentary. It's really worth seeing. He also has a diary. So there's a book that they put out that kind of details some of his notes from his diary, and I have it. Like, it came out kind of a little bit after the film, but in recent years they released scanned in pages of his actual diary, and then it's translated into English, so you see like his sketches and how he wrote, and he kind of goes through the film, and you do get a story of kind of his trials and tribulations, because the studio really didn't want him on this film. They didn't get it, and O'Bannon wanted him so bad that he paid him $1,000 to do some of the artwork in the beginning, and then, hey, it's not going to happen. He goes away, and then when Ridley comes on, they show him this Giger stuff, and Ridley's like, this is it. Like, this is the movie. Like, if this creature, this alien, looks this cool and this badass, like, we have a film. If this guy works on this film, we have a film. Because if you just took this script on paper, and we'll get into it in the next episode about different incarnations of stuff like this in the past, it's going to fall flat, and it's going to feel like a weird B movie. But Giger puts it over the edge because of what you're seeing from him. Nobody has ever seen on film before. And then he goes to work on a bunch of other films. He works on Prometheus for a little bit. They credit him with some stuff on Covenant. He famously is only credited for the creation of the creature on Aliens, and is not even allowed on set. And we can get to that when we get to that film, which adds some of my grief towards that film. And then he's added back on to the credits. He works on Alien 3 a little bit. And I don't know, is it a good time? Are we, I guess I could tell it. We got time. So I met H.R. Giger once. So there was a show in the city, and at a gallery, and he doesn't come to, he didn't come to the States a lot. So this gallery was opening up, and their first show there was Giger, and I happened to know the people who owned the gallery. So not only did I go to the opening, but I had a moment where they sort of pulled me in the back and were like, hey, do you want to meet him? So he was standing there, and with his wife or girlfriend at the time, and I ended up in a group of like 4 of us, him being one of them. I shook his hand. His hand was very soft. He smelled like fresh baked cookies. He just seemed like a nice guy dressed in all black.
Did you get a pic?
Short. I did not get a pic.
Ooh.
I did not get a pic. I have a pic of me at the gallery at the time, but this is so long ago, Shawn, that I didn't have an iPhone.
Predates the iPhone, I'm sure.
So there's no I had a disposable camera at that show, right? And I certainly wasn't pulling out that piece of plastic out of my pocket and being like, crank, 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 hey, Mr. Giger. But it was also like, and I'm sure you've been in these moments where it would have been weird to ask for a photo or an autograph because you're now like behind the scenes, and he's taking a break from being Giger and
cool
front of all, right? So you got to act like you've been there. Sometimes that act like you've been there really ruins the fun. You need another, like a wingman, to be like, hey, let me get a flick, and then you take it. You need somebody else to say it, right?
I didn't want to, but I mean, if he's telling us we have to, then I just real quick. Yeah.
Exactly. And actually, for a little while, I was part of a co-op gallery in Manhattan called Subculture Gallery. A bunch of other artists were part of it, including Tristan Eaton, who's gone out to be like a really super successful artist. But Giger there used to be a Giger chair and one of the Bullet Baby sculptures that he had in the gallery. So the same gallery that I showed artwork in, we'd show different artwork like kind of on a monthly basis, but Giger stuff, the chair and the Bullet Baby would just be in there. So I've sat in one of the Giger chairs. He had that whole room at the Limelight in New York City. Have you ever been in that room?
I didn't get to go to the Limelight before it closed down.
Yeah, so there was a Giger room with stuff hanging on the wall. One of those, like the sculpture that they used for the Carcass album cover, and they had tables with all the biomech stuff with glass on top of it and everything. So obviously for me, a huge influence on my art. Now everybody in biomech's been seen by a million people, and it's spawned a lot of very poor tattoos or and other designs. But like when he's doing it at that time, it's nobody has seen anything like that. And his documentary, I don't know what it's called. I could look it up after this and mention on the next episode. But that's a really incredible documentary. You get to see his house and his
The
collections,
shadow
and
gallery.
he has like a little train that he rides on, this little like Giger train in his yard. It's a biomech looking train, so it's very cool.
The inside of this derelict ship looks awesome. It looks like it's like a spinal cord and ribs going through the top of it. It's friggin' gnarly. Kane's climbing a wall, which presents us our first horrific discovery. This big, enormous being in this gigantic chair with a huge gun-looking device pointing towards the sky. Dallas says it's an alien life form. Looks like it's been dead a long time. Looks like it's growing out of the chair. Dallas looks at its chest. It's exploded. The bones are bent outward. Looks like he exploded from the inside. Lambert is creeped out, wants to get the hell out of there. And we get a clear shot of this being's face in the chair. It almost has like an elephant quality, but it is super creepy.
Yeah, and this is one of the shots that puts this movie over even more, right? They built this entire set just for this one scene. So they build this, what they call the space jockey, and they build it almost on a big like turntable, so they can turn it because the background behind it is just one wall. They were just built one wall with all the biomech stuff on it. So to get different angles and shots, they would turn the space jockey and get it, because it's a ton of money to make this. And this was one of the shots that they had to fight for to have in the film, because the studio was kind of like, hey, this is expensive, and like, why do we need this? And yeah, I mean, I guess you could just skip ahead to the next part, but it's scenes like this that put this movie over. This is what's ingrained.
Creates that doom, that thick tension of just like, what is this? And I love for the entirety of the movie, none of it is explained.
Right. And we don't know what this is for another 30 something years after that. And so like me watching this as a little kid, I really have no idea what this is. I drew this thing a million times. I couldn't figure out what it was. All my friends had theories. There were like, you would get Starlog and there'd be another picture of it, or there's famously shots of Giger, because he worked on this. He's literally sculpting this along with them. And he's using real human bones to make impressions and molds to build this stuff. So this is just an incredible, incredible moment in this film that just takes this cramped space truckers and then quickly opens us up. We're 28 minutes into the film, and it opens us up to this enormous world. What the hell is this thing? What is going on? What's happened here? And then we don't learn anything else about it. And I love that. Like that thing freaked me out. Like I had no idea what it was. Is it,
because like immediately it opens up your eyes, because I mean, from Prometheus, like you see it in the, but again, we're not thinking Prometheus, but it's like 10 times bigger than that. Like they walk into this room and the jockey, it's like a giant. So immediately, like, not only is there definitely life outside, but it's this huge, like life outside of Earth. Like,
right.
We're in the ship. Yes. We're on a different planet. Yes. We're traveling through space to deliver mineral ore. Yes. However, they've never seen an alien in this. In this movie, it doesn't sound like. So to walk into that and see this being that is jolly green giant size, it's like, oh my. And you wonder, like, are you going to see one of these for real in the movie in the end? Like, yeah, it's just, it sparks a whole lot of curiosity.
And we don't know if in this timeline, if you're traveling on space, is this the first time they've ever discovered any aliens? Like
I
they
think
kind of,
so. Ash kind of alludes to that.
but in general, I wonder because it's in the future. It's pretty far in the future if it's existed or this is the only connection that they've ever had. The other thing is too, it's funny though, it doesn't, for as beautiful it is, it doesn't make a lot of logistical sense because he's so immense. But like the areas that they were walking and stuff, those corridors and stuff are like not big enough for him to pass through. Although the ship seems like it could be like a little bit alive in some ways, you know, a little bit of kind of a living organism thing going on. So maybe it can kind of, you know, ebb and flow with him. But it's funny. It just, there are a few images that really bury into people's brains in this film, and this is one of them. This, you know, we'll get to another one in a little bit, but we start heading on a quick path here where we're just breaking ground at every stop.
Back on the ship, Ripley tells Ash it doesn't look like an SOS. It looks like a warning. Ripley wants to head out and tell them. And immediately Ash jumps at her. What's the point? By the time you get there, they'll know if it's a warning or not. Very weird to say, Ash. Very weird. Back in the alien ship, they lower Kane into this creepy alien-looking tunnel. It looks like alien bones. Kane says it's hot as the damn tropics in here. And he's lowered into this enormous alien cavern, which I think is like an enormous piece of Giger art as a background or something, or an art piece done by him.
I mean, he worked on a lot of that. There's a lot of photos of him actually working on it, like sanding stuff down and being involved in it. There's a lot of matte painting. But what's really interesting about this, Shawn, is, and I never thought of this until I started doing research for this movie, like extensive research. This egg area is not necessarily part of the ship. So in the original script and the original idea, the eggs would be housed in almost like a pyramid type structure, which we touch on in other films. This ship is on top of that structure. That's actually what it's supposed to be. I never thought that. I always thought that this egg chamber was in the ship itself.
So it's below the ship. That's what
So
they're
the
lowering
ship,
him into, this cavern.
so if we just have to basically turn off our Prometheus alien's brain for a second, right? And say they landed on this, the ship crash lands or lands on this egg chamber. And when he goes into that area, it's almost like it's like worn, like it's not like a hatch. If you look at it, like maybe it was acid or something. And then this happens. So I think if we're pulling it apart from other, you know, parts of this universe, it's safe to say that crash land on these eggs, one of them comes out, scampers up, takes care of our guy in the chair, so on and so forth. But I don't, someone can correct me, but in all my reading of this was actually, and I never knew this, it's not part of the ship. It's this massive cavern that they're in. I know it's a big ship, but this is massive, massive cavern. So it makes sense the way the ship is there and kind of crooked, that maybe it landed and kind of crushed this thing, or it landed by accident, or we also never know where the signal is coming from.
Correct.
Right? So was the signal something that's emitted from this temple or pyramid or whatever it was with the eggs in it? Or was it the SOS? Because you could assume the SOS is coming from the space jockey, right? Hey, I found this stuff and I'm in trouble and we got to go. But like, why would he send, he or she send an SOS if they just landed on a room full of eggs? Like, what's the big deal? So like, he wouldn't know to be upset until something happened. We don't see any other space jockeys. It's not like we see bodies. Like, so it's confusing. That part's confusing. But I love it. And this is icky and gooey when we get into this section with these, you know, you used a lot of real human bones to build it. And this far shot of Kane coming down and you see the cavernous view of this, you know, many years before a Tool video was made, but it's got, they kind of dive into that a little bit here.
Kane sees this light blue mist hovering over a bunch of what he calls leathery looking objects, like eggs or something. Kane kneels down to touch this mist and slips his goofy ass into the egg pile. He's walking through this massive field of eggs. Again, another question unanswered by this movie, but asked in Aliens, where are all these eggs coming from? He's looking directly down at them. There is this black goo that's bubbling on the eggs. It almost appears to be dripping upward.
Yes, so cool. So cool.
Kane says the egg is completely sealed. He puts his head above it and it hisses. He quickly pulls it away. He shines his light at the egg and something is in it. Wait a minute. There's movement. Seems to have organic life. Uh-oh.
And so these eggs, Shawn, the crew stuffed them with sheep intestines and cow stomach lining to create this organic look. And Ridley himself put a pair of gloves on and kind of had his hand in there, sort of like moving this stuff around. And the smoke that we see, it was apparently inspired by The Who. So they were rehearsing near the set of Alien in Shepperton Studios. And the production designer, had a friend that worked on it, and they were working with some smoke and some lasers. And they said, we got to get Ridley here, because they were trying to figure out a way to like have that layer of something. And he saw it and he was like, that's going to work. So like the Who kind of like helped them, the Who's crew kind of helped them get there. And what's funny is we see these eggs and we see the top part of the eggs, right? And it's like a cross, and you're going to describe it to us in a second. But the famous story is that Giger, which all of his stuff is, is all like sexual in nature. They were very upset because they said it looked like a vagina that was on the top of the egg, right? So Giger crossed two of them. And he says in one of the documentaries, so now I made two vaginas. And it was okay that they were crossed, but that was kind of his way around it. And I think I like it better a little that way. I think it would have been a little too on the nose before, but it's kind of interesting that they're sort of battling this as they're going along with trying to get a certain rating. And Shawn, using all of this food stuff on set, we'll get more of it later on. This stuff gets nasty. So it's 1978. We're filming this movie. We don't know if it's going to be a big deal or not. It's really freaking weird. And I got to be around these people, and it's middle of the night, and now the place stinks, and it's all this smoke and intestines and everything, and we're doing shot after shot, and the hot lights are hitting this stuff. It definitely adds to the uncomfortableness. I don't think you could make this movie now, though, the way they made it, for sure. There's probably a lot of different rules involved, but these eggs are also iconic. We always say that.
The egg opens up slowly and beautifully. It like blossoms like a flower. Kane looks inside of it. It's disgusting. All these like chicken cutlet looking things, like you said, cow intestines with veins slipping and sliding all over the place. Kane leans in to take a closer look. And this, my friend, I feel is the perfect spot for us to take a rest till next week, till we catch up to the thrilling part 2 of episode 34 of In Madness Pod, Alien, a movie we waited over a year and a half to put our dirty little fingers on top of. This is the premiere podcast, In Madness Pod, at In Madness Pod on the socials, inmadnesspod@gmail.com, to ask us any questions you may have about the first of this episode. Check us out on YouTube. Like, subscribe, comment, give us the 5 stars. Check out the In Madness Spotify playlist. Get your In Madness shirts at inmadness.com. And is there anything you wanted to say to wrap up part 1? We made it through part 1 of Alien.
We made it through part 1. I've talked an awful lot. I apologize for that, Shawn. But there's so much info, and you're flying through this movie, and I'm like, no, wait. What about this? What about that? And this has been awesome. I appreciate anyone who's listening. I'm Vertebrae33 on all the socials. You can check out my shirts at Hot Topic. We've got Comic-Con, right, New York Comic-Con right around the corner at the Javits Center in New York City. Shawn will be there on the 19th. I'll be there 17th through the 20th. We will have In Madness stickers and shirts. And if you stop by the booth, we'll put you on the podcast. We'll talk to you and we'll put you on the podcast. Shawn will take pictures with you if you want. He'll hold your baby. He'll do whatever you want. It's fine. And honestly, like, I am so excited for the world to hear us talk about this film. And I appreciate anyone listening.
Thank you very much, friends. We will see you next week.